Hi, Charles SirBookSage here, and this is episode 15 of my Harry Potter First Time Reread series. If this is your first time here, I am rereading the entire 7-book Harry Potter series for the very first time, and I've broken it up into about 52, 53 sections, and every Sunday I read a set of chapters and record a weekly vlog and upload those every Monday. And I also have other BookTube content that I upload on Wednesdays and Fridays. So hit that like, hit that subscribe button if that's content you're interested in. And let's get into this week's vlog. Today, I am starting my reread of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I'll be discussing the first 3 chapters today. And I have been looking forward to this, to year 4 of Hogwarts. Should be a lot of fun. And let's get into it. Chapter 1, The Riddle House. And this is a really interesting opening. This is, I believe, the first time in the Harry Potter series where we are getting a chapter from a point of view that isn't Harry Potter. I don't believe any of the pages we've read in the first 3 books centered on any other character from their point of view. At least I don't recall that. So I think this is the first time Rowling is letting us see the event through somebody else's eyes. And this has a very Stephen King vibe here to it, at least for me. Not in that it's a horror story or anything like that, but J.K. Rowling introduces us to Frank Bryce, gives us a whole in-depth history of his backstory, who he is, he's gardener for the Riddle family. We get all this information about him just for him to be killed by the end of the chapter, which Stephen King has a fondness as a writer for doing to characters in some of his books. His book, It, is littered with people you get introduced to, learn all about, and then die. So this kind of struck me as similar to that, at least in terms of the technique used. Though, of course, the writing style and story is very different. What's really interesting here is we learn about Tom Riddle's family. And a mystery, because we obviously know Tom Riddle went to Hogwarts, became Voldemort. So we know Tom Riddle existed, and this story, however, has the Riddle family being killed, or just the maid discovering all 3, the parents and their son Tom, their adult son Tom, dead at like the breakfast table. And Frank Bryce is their gardener, who is a war veteran, has like a stiff leg, and doesn't like to interact with people. And he's arrested as the prime suspect. But when the coroner's report comes back, there is no cause of death. Other than being dead, they are in the picture of health. I think that's the way Rowling puts it in the book. So they let Frank Bryce go because clearly there's no indication that they were even murdered. It's just kind of a great big mystery as to how they died. But it's also a mystery to the reader is, okay, this claims that Tom Riddle died. But Tom Riddle was at Hogwarts, so this is an interesting mystery presented here in the book that we'll learn. We don't really learn, I think, the answers to until Half-Blood Prince, maybe? I forget where and when we'll start learning more about what really went down. But a great introduction. We get to see Peter Pettigrew, who goes, according by Voldemort, calls him Wormtail. And I like Peter Pettigrew. He's an interesting character. Wormtail, as Peter Pettigrew is known, he strikes me as he's a kind of Rowling's version of Grima Wormtongue from The Lord of the Rings, who was sent in to Rohan to just like cause havoc and trouble and doubt and everything in everyone's mind. He kind of plays that sort of role of the sniveling servant who hates his master and fears his master, but is stuck doing whatever his master wants. And in this case, he's keeping Voldemort alive. We learn now that Voldemort is definitely back in a physical body, though we don't really get a real description of it. You know it's obviously grotesque. And he's being sustained by Nagini, his snake, being milked, which so I'm assuming it's poison from him and then put into some sort of potion that helps sustain Voldemort. And we learn a few interesting facts here. We learn Voldemort, obviously back in physical form. Pettigrew, who he calls Wormtail's lone servant. Someone named Bertha Jorkins was kidnapped by Wormtail, who was then brought to Voldemort. And apparently Voldemort interrogated her, tortured her, and got whatever information he was after out of her, and then killed her. And we now know Voldemort has who he considers his most loyal, trusted servant, who's out there somewhere, waiting to come to his side and be who he wishes Wormtail could be, because Wormtail is mostly worthless and useless, other than just menial things, even though Wormtail is keeping him alive at this point. And we also know someone else needs to be murdered to set in motion this kind of elaborate plan Voldemort has that will see his rise and the death of Harry Potter. And of course, because sports is sports, none of this can be done until the Quidditch World Cup is done. And the World Cup is about to begin. So they kind of have to lay low until that's done. And not because Voldemort wants to watch the match. It's because there's so much security and so much scrutiny on the area because the Quidditch World Cup is being hosted there, that Voldemort's smart enough to know, look, we'll just lay low for a couple of weeks and let everyone go back to their normal routine, and then we'll begin. And Frank Bryce is he wakes up in the middle of the night, sees lights on in the house, thinks it's kids, goes over to the main Riddle house, sneaks upstairs thinking he's going to catch these kids, and he starts hearing this entire conversation between Voldemort and Peter, which is where we, the reader, through Frank listening, learn all these things. And then here comes Nagini, the snake, and goes into the room, and the snake tells Voldemort, because we hear them talking parcel tongue, that Frank's out in the hallway. And Frank is brought into the room, shown Voldemort, and then Voldemort, of course, murders him. And the chapter ends with Harry Potter waking up at that moment. Really, really interesting opening. Again, to have a chapter not from Harry's point of view was a complete change of pace to have how these books usually open. And already we're getting an indication here that the stakes have just taken another huge jump up, where Voldemort is no longer this sort of nebulous thing that we saw sort of hybrid versions of in the first two books. Didn't really see in the third book so much as servants of his beginning to start taking action. And now we get Voldemort in the flesh, and he's beginning to now rebuild himself and his Dark Wizard forces. And I thought it was a great way to start the book, to start us right there. Voldemort is here and is now a direct physical body, direct threat, even though still at this point very, very weak and unable to do a lot in terms of moving around. He can obviously still kill people because he's got his wand and he's powerful, but still he's got a ways to go before he can be running around himself. But a great, great introduction. Next up, Chapter 2, The Scar. So, as the Chapter 1 ended, Harry Potter wakes up in bed, and from his scar, because it's burning, and the only ever time it's really ever hurt him was when Voldemort was physically very close to him, like present in Hogwarts or on the Hogwarts grounds, like in the first couple of books. So naturally Harry's worried because he's afraid Voldemort's close by and he's like maybe gonna pop up and kill them. But he can't like take Voldemort in that world and put it on Privet Drive. His mind can't put those pieces together. But what's really interesting here is Harry has seen the events that just happened in the first chapter. He watched this conversation take place and Frank Bryce being murdered, and then woke up. And he's just trying to hold on to the memories of the dream. And as happens a lot in real life, even vivid dreams can fade. The details of can fade really, really quick. And so we get this first inclination here of the connection now between Voldemort and Harry. That it's deeper, that there's a lot more to this scar than just, a scar, that there's a deeper significance to it. And we get this first indication that they are sort of psychically linked to each other. And nicely set up here, nicely done. And then Rowling, which he's really good at, is giving you a piece of really important information and then going, squirrel, look at this over here. So then your brain kind of files it away, but you don't concentrate on it because she's given it to you to just park there for later. But then she brings your attention right away to something else because she doesn't want you dwelling on it yet. She wants it to be a surprise when the reveal comes later, but subconsciously your brain will know it worked and was set up here at this moment. And I like how she's able to do that as a writer. And we saw a lot of that in the first 3 books, where she's really good at planting seeds, and sometimes planting seeds for things that don't really come to fruition until books and books later. But other than that initial beginning of the chapter, this is all backstory. This is a what has come before, a recap of Harry Potter's life. And really well done. We learn about what happened, Harry's parents being murdered, the whole works. Basically a really quick rundown of the major events of the first 3 books, handled in really just a couple of pages. And then after the recap, we get back to Harry worrying about his scar and missing having a proper parental person in his life. Because obviously the Dursleys are useless and worthless. And the idea, like he mentions, of going to Uncle Vernon about his worries about Voldemort coming to kill them, that's not happening. That's not even in the realm of possibility. And then he finally realizes, I can write to my godfather, Sirius Black. So he starts to write him a letter. So that he can, and he lets Black know that his scar has been bothering him, that it's only ever bothered him in physical, close proximity to Voldemort. What's interesting I like about this, too, is he imagines what Hermione's reaction would be. And her reaction in his brain is, tell Dumbledore, and I'm going to go read a book about it and find out. And it's interesting here, too, because Harry kind of realizes that this is important. The dream, the scar, and he knows it's important, but is afraid to tell anybody because of what their reaction might be to it, which is common occurrence among not just kids but adults as well. They withhold information out of fear of being judged for what they're worried about. So he only tells Sirius about the scar hurting and not about the dream and what he saw and what it might mean. And that's pretty much this chapter. Again, mostly just a quick history lesson of the wizarding world and what's gone before in the 3 books. Again, quick chapter. Chapter 3, The Invitation. Now, it's the morning. The whole Dursleys are now up when Harry finally goes downstairs. The Dursleys are sitting around the square kitchen table. Vernon is behind reading his paper, the Daily Mail. And Dudley is now pretty much takes up the entire side of a table by himself because he's now rounder than he is tall, which is one of the things apparently he threatened them to always become. He's apparently become at this point. So much where the gym clothes that the school provides, they don't have anything big enough for him. And they've sent home a meal guide. And we learn all of Dudley's sweets have been taken away from him. And Mrs. Dursley and Petunia is serving them all like pieces of grapefruit, and that's their breakfast. And the whole family has to eat this, along with Dudley to kind of be there with him in his transformation of his body. And breakfast is interrupted because the postman rings, and he's at the door, actually, for some reason, hand delivering a letter rather than just putting it in the mailbox. And here's Uncle Vernon, furious, calls Harry into the living room, and it's a letter from Mrs. Weasley. She sent actual, regular Muggle mail, asking permission for Harry to come to the Quidditch World Cup and to stay with them the rest of the summer, and she'll see Harry off to school. And I love the part where she writes, like, P.S. I hope there was enough stamps. And the envelope is covered, every inch of it is covered in stamps, except for a tiny little window there where she wrote the Dursleys' address as small as possible. Which, of course, one thing Vernon freaks out about is anything that would give anyone reason to look at his family and think there's anything other than just normal. What's interesting here, this time around, where normally this would see Harry have everything taken away from him and him locked in his room for the rest of the summer, things are a bit different now. The dynamic is different because they know about Sirius Black, or at least the version of Sirius Black that Harry's told them about. They know Sirius Black was a crazy murderer, and Harry's let them believe that his godfather is a crazy murderer, and that his godfather would be very displeased if anything bad happened to Harry, or if he was mistreated in any way. So Harry's been playing that to his advantage with the Dursleys, which has changed the dynamic a bit. He actually has all of his wizarding books and everything that he has for the summer in his room, because the first 3 seasons, 3 summers, they would lock it away and not let anything related to Hogwarts be seen anywhere. But because of their fear of Sirius Black showing up to murder them, they've let Harry have all of his stuff, but as long as he keeps it in his room. So Harry's able to he can see Vernon's thought process working through, if I let Harry go, then Harry will be happy, and I can't allow Harry to be happy. But if I don't let him go, then I'm going to be stuck with this kid the rest of the summer. If I let him go, I'll be happy. And the dilemma between whose happiness matters more, or denying whose happiness matters more to Uncle Vernon. And Harry just plays his Sirius Black card and is like, well, my crazy murderer and godfather wouldn't be pleased if I didn't get to go, kind of thing. So then Uncle Vernon's like, all right, you can go. Good riddance, kind of thing. And then Harry goes back upstairs, and then a letter arrives from Ron. Hedwig has been out hunting, so Hedwig's back. And Pig, the tiny little owl that Ron got as a gift from Sirius Black at the end of The Prisoner of Azkaban. And Pig is a tiny little owl, and he's flying, zigzagging all over the room, so happy he actually made it to deliver this letter. And it's a letter from Ron telling him that, let us know if you're coming to the Quidditch World Cup, because you're going anyway. We don't care if the permission's being given. We thought, my mom thought it was a good thing to ask anyway, but we're bringing you regardless. So, which is, of course, you gotta love the Weasleys. They're such a great family. And what was interesting too is Harry doesn't want to tell them about the scar, because he knows, one, Fred and George will probably just make fun of him for it, but Mrs. Weasley in particular will just fawn all over him and keep a watch on him and worry about him, so he doesn't want her to worry. So again, the only one he's going to be telling, at least at this point, is Sirius Black. So Harry sends little Pig back with a note saying permission's been given. I'll see you guys when you show up. And Hedwig is tasked with carrying his letter off to wherever Sirius Black is, which, based on some of the weird large tropical birds that have delivered letters, Sirius is in warm weather somewhere. A place like the Dementors would be least likely to go, apparently. At this point, all thoughts of his scar and the dream with Voldemort and what may have happened and murders are all kind of out of his head at this point. He just can't wait for the following day when he gets out of the Dursleys' house for the rest of the summer, gets to go to the Quidditch World Cup and spend the rest of the summer, this last month, with the Weasleys. And that's where it ends. And those are the chapters for this week, just those 3. And this is going to be really, really fun. We're now into the big books, the big door stoppers, after the first 3 books, which were generally smaller. Yeah, this one is over 700 pages long and 734 hardcover edition. And I do love this cover, though. I mean, it really is such a great cover all around. I mean, the covers on these editions were just really, really wonderful because there's so many things to pay attention to that are on these covers. You know, all these little things to watch for, you know, here, and the different characters. And there's a lot of the story in these covers, which is one of my favorite things about them. It's fun to, when you finish reading the book, to take the book back out and look at the illustration all across the front and the back. And then you see, oh, okay, this is what all these little moments are that are all throughout this cover. And this, again, this is one of my favorites. It's kind of an iconic image of Harry there. So next week is going to be chapters 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And back to the Burrow, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, the Portkey, Bagman and Crouch, and the Quidditch World Cup. I just remember this whole opening movement of this book, really, really loving it. Because we spent a big chunk of this before we even get to Hogwarts. You know, we spent a lot more time outside of Hogwarts in this book. Rowling's writing just keeps getting sharper and sharper and sharper here. I want to know from you what you thought of particularly that opening chapter, the Riddle House, of getting to see that scene from someone else's point of view, of what you learned about how the Riddles died, and that the belief is that Tom Riddle died, and the fact that there's a loyal servant who you have to assume is someone in Hogwarts. Lots of great info, world building, and setup for future events in that opening chapter. And it was a big departure for Rowling to write that from what we've seen in every other chapter, where it's only ever been really Harry's point of view. But really well done, paid off very, very well. And I'm going to end it here. I am Charles, this is SirBookSage. Happy reading.